My dad died in a car crash with his secret fiancée. I hated her until I found hidden home videos that changed everything. I'm Jasper, 24M, and I need advice on a complicated family situation that's been tearing me apart. My mom, Elaine, 46F, left when I was just 3 years old. I don't remember much about her, just fleeting images of blonde hair and the smell of lavender perfume. Since then, it's been me and my dad, Rick, 52M, against the world. We lived in a small apartment in Chicago, in a neighborhood that wasn't the best but was all we could afford. Dad worked as a mechanic during the day and picked up bartending shifts at night. Times were tough, but Dad always made sure I had everything I needed. I remember one Christmas when I was about 8. I had been begging for this new video game console that all my friends had. Dad had been working extra shifts for weeks, and I thought for sure he was saving up to buy it. Christmas morning came, and there was no console under our tiny artificial tree. Instead, there was a second-hand bike. I was disappointed, but tried not to show it. Dad must have seen it on my face though, because he sat me down and explained that he had been saving for the console, but our old car had broken down and he had to use the money for repairs so he could get to work. He had found the bike at a garage sale and fixed it up himself. That bike ended up being my favorite gift ever. Dad taught me to ride it in the empty parking lot behind our building, running alongside me until I got my balance. Despite the long hours, Dad always found time for me. He'd help with my homework, coach my little league team, and on rare days off, we'd go to the park and play catch. Those were the best days. When I was 12, Dad got an amazing job offer in Seattle. It was for a position as head mechanic at a luxury car dealership. It meant leaving behind everything we knew, but it also meant a better life for us. Plus, my Aunt Sarah, 48F, Dad's sister, lived there, so we'd have some family nearby. The move was hard. I had to say goodbye to all my friends, to the only home I'd ever known. Dad tried to make it an adventure. We road-tripped across the country, stopping at cheesy tourist traps and eating way too much fast food. We saw the world's largest ball of twine in Minnesota, visited Mount Rushmore, and even spent a day at Yellowstone. It was the best 2 weeks of my life. Seattle was a fresh start. Dad's new job paid well, and for the first time, we weren't living paycheck to paycheck. We moved into a small house with an actual yard, a far cry from our cramped Chicago apartment. Aunt Sarah was great too. She'd come over for Sunday dinners and always brought the best desserts. She made these amazing apple pies that Dad swore were just like our grandmother used to make. I started at a new school, which was tough at first. I was the new kid with the funny accent. Apparently, I had a Chicago accent I never knew about. But eventually, I made friends. I joined the school's robotics club and discovered a passion for technology that would shape my future. Life was good, but I could tell Dad was lonely. He never dated, always saying I was enough for him. But sometimes, I'd catch him looking at old photos with a sad look in his eyes. I knew he missed having a partner, someone to share his life with. When I was 16, things changed. Dad started coming home from work with a smile on his face. He started taking more care with his appearance, even buying new clothes. At first, I thought maybe he'd gotten a promotion or something. But then one day, he sat me down and told me he had met someone, Linda, 50F. Linda worked as a receptionist at the car dealership. Dad described her as kind, funny, and beautiful. He seemed happier than I'd seen him in years. I was happy for him, really. But a part of me was also scared. For so long, it had just been me and Dad. I didn't know how to share him with someone else. The first time I met Linda was at a dinner Dad arranged at our house. She was nice enough, bringing a homemade lasagna and asking me all about school and my friends. But something about her rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it was how quickly she tried to insert herself into our lives, or how she'd make little comments about how Dad raised me. Like how she thought I should have a stricter curfew, or how she didn't approve of the violent video games I played. As Dad and Linda's relationship progressed, I found myself feeling more and more uncomfortable. Linda started spending more time at our house. She'd rearrange things in the kitchen, saying it was more efficient. She'd buy groceries without asking what we liked. It felt like she was trying to take over. Things came to a head on my 18th birthday. Dad and I had always had this tradition where we'd go camping for my birthday weekend. Just us, roughing it in the woods, telling stories around the campfire. We'd been doing it since I was 10, when Dad finally felt I was old enough to handle sleeping in a tent. This year, Dad invited Linda to join us. I was furious. This was our thing, and he was letting her intrude. We had a huge fight about it. I said some things I'm not proud of, accusing Dad of trying to replace Mom with Linda, of forgetting about me. Dad tried to calm me down, saying he just wanted the two most important people in his life to get along. But I was too angry to listen. I ended up storming out and spending the night at my friend Mike's place. The next morning, I got a call that changed everything. There had been a car accident. Dad and Linda were on their way to the campsite when another driver ran a red light and T-boned them. Dad didn't make it. Linda was in critical condition. I was devastated. The guilt was overwhelming. If I hadn't thrown a fit about Linda coming camping, they wouldn't have been on that road. Aunt Sarah tried to comfort me, but I pushed her away. I couldn't bear to face anyone. The funeral was a blur. Linda was still in the hospital, so it was just me, Aunt Sarah, and a handful of Dad's co-workers. I felt so alone. I kept expecting Dad to walk in, to tell me this was all a bad dream. But he never did. A week after the funeral, Linda was released from the hospital. She came to our house, well, my house now, to collect some of Dad's things. That's when she dropped a bombshell on me. She and Dad had gotten engaged. They were planning to surprise me with the news on our camping trip. She showed me the ring, a simple gold band that Dad always wore on a chain around his neck. I had always assumed it was his wedding ring from his marriage to my mom. Linda told me that in Dad's will, he had left everything to me, but with the stipulation that Linda could live in the house until I turned 25 or graduated college, whichever came first. She said she wanted us to live together, to be a family like Dad had wanted. I didn't know how to process any of this. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her she had no right to my dad or our home. But another part remembered how happy Dad had been with her. In the end, I agreed to give it a try. It's been 6 months now, and things are tense. Linda tries to act like my mom, which drives me crazy. She's always asking about my classes, my friends, if I'm eating enough. I know she means well, but it feels like she's trying to replace Dad, and I can't stand it. I've been trying to focus on my studies. I'm in my second year of college, studying computer science. It's challenging, but I love it. I think Dad would have been proud. He always encouraged my interest in technology, even when he didn't understand half of what I was talking about. Last week, I overheard Linda on the phone with someone, talking about selling the house. She was saying how it was too big for just the two of us, and how she could use the money to start fresh somewhere else. I was furious. This was my home, full of memories of Dad. The backyard where he taught me to grill. The living room where we'd watch old sci-fi movies together. The garage where he showed me how to change oil and replace a tire. She had no right to even think about selling it. I confronted her about it, and she broke down crying. She admitted that she was struggling financially. Dad's life insurance payout wasn't as much as she had hoped, and her medical bills from the accident were piling up. She said she didn't want to burden me with this, but she didn't see any other option. I don't know what to do. Part of me feels bad for Linda, she lost Dad too, after all. But another part of me is angry that she's even considering selling our home. I'm thinking about dropping out of college to get a full-time job so we can keep the house, but I know Dad wouldn't have wanted that. He always stressed the importance of education, saying it was the key to a better life than he had. Am I wrong for not wanting to sell the house? Should I be more understanding of Linda's situation? I feel lost without Dad, and I don't know how to handle this. Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. Thank you all for your responses. I've been reading through them, and you've given me a lot to think about. I wanted to give you an update on what's been happening. After my post, I decided to have a real, honest conversation with Linda. I told her how I felt about her trying to be my mom, about selling the house, all of it. It wasn't easy, but I'm glad I did it. Linda opened up to me too. She told me that she's been struggling more than I realized. Not just financially, but emotionally too. She loved Dad just as much as I did, and she's been trying to honor his memory by taking care of me. She admitted that she probably overstepped in trying to be a mother figure to me. We talked about the house situation. Linda showed me all the bills and financial documents. The situation is worse than I thought. Not only are there medical bills from the accident, but apparently, Dad had some debts I didn't know about. The life insurance barely covered the funeral expenses and outstanding debts. Linda explained that Dad had taken out a second mortgage on the house a few years ago to help pay for my college tuition. I had no idea he had done this. I knew money was tight, but Dad always insisted I focus on my studies and not worry about the finances. Finding out about this sacrifice he made for me, it hit me hard. I realized that selling the house might be our only option. But I couldn't bear the thought of losing my childhood home, the last real connection I have to Dad. So, I came up with a plan. I'm taking a year off from college. Before you all start protesting, hear me out. I found a good paying job at a local tech startup. It's entry level, but the salary is decent, and there's room for growth. I'm going to work full-time and put most of my earnings towards the house and bills. The job is actually pretty exciting. They're developing new software for automated car diagnostics. It's like my two worlds colliding, Dad's love of cars and my passion for technology. When I told them about my background, growing up with a mechanic dad and studying computer science, they were really interested. They think my unique perspective could be valuable to the project. Linda agreed to look for a job too. She was a teacher before she started working at the car dealership. There's a school in our district hiring. It's not guaranteed, but it's a start. She's been brushing up on her skills, taking some online courses to update her teaching certifications. We also decided to rent out the spare bedroom. It's not ideal having a stranger in the house, but it'll help with the mortgage. We're being careful about who we choose, running background checks and everything. We've had a few potential renters come look at the room. One of them, a grad student named Alex, seems promising. He's studying environmental science and seems quiet and respectful. I know this isn't a perfect solution. I'm putting my education on hold, which is risky. But I keep thinking about how hard Dad worked to give us this life. I can't just let it all slip away without a fight. There's one more thing. While going through Dad's things, I found a letter he had written to me. It was in case something happened to him. In it, he talked about how proud he was of me, and how he hoped I'd give Linda a chance. He wrote that she made him happier than he'd been in years, and that he hoped we could be a family. Reading that letter, it hit me hard. I realized I've been so caught up in my own grief that I haven't really considered Linda's feelings. She lost the man she loved too. We're not going to become best friends overnight, but I'm going to try to be more understanding. Dad also wrote about his hopes for my future. He said he knew I was destined for great things, and that he hoped I'd use my skills to make the world a better place. He mentioned how excited he was when I built my first computer, even though he didn't understand how it all worked. He said watching me grow and learn filled him with more pride than he could express. So that's where we're at now. Linda and I are both job hunting. We're getting the spare room ready to rent out. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to try to make it work. For Dad, I've been thinking a lot about what Dad would want. He always taught me the importance of family, of sticking together through tough times. I think he'd be proud of Linda and me for trying to work things out. I'll keep you all updated on how things go. Thank you again for all your advice and support. It means more than you know. Update 2. It's been a few months since my last update, and a lot has changed. Some good, some not so good. First, the good news. I've been working at the tech startup for about 4 months now, and it's going well. The work is challenging but rewarding. I'm learning so much about software development and the automotive industry. I even got a small raise last month after I helped solve a tricky bug in our diagnostic software. My team lead mentioned that if I keep this up, I might be in line for a promotion soon. Linda found a job too, teaching 3rd grade at a nearby elementary school. She seems happier now that she's back in the classroom. Sometimes she comes home with funny stories about her students that remind me of the stories Dad used to tell about customers at the dealership. Our new housemate, Alex, moved in last month. He's a quiet grad student, mostly keeps to himself, but he's friendly enough. Between our 2 incomes and Alex's rent, we've been able to keep up with the mortgage and bills. It's tight, but we're managing. Now for the not so good news. Remember how I mentioned finding that letter from Dad? Well, it turns out there was more to the story. Last month, on what would have been Dad and Linda's first wedding anniversary, Linda got really emotional. She started talking about their relationship, and she let slip something that shook me to my core. Apparently, Dad and Linda had known each other for years before they started dating. They met at a grief support group shortly after Mom left. Linda had lost her husband to cancer. They became friends, supporting each other through the tough times. It wasn't until years later, when I was in high school, that their relationship turned romantic. I was stunned. All this time, I thought Linda was some newcomer in Dad's life, but she had been there for years. I felt betrayed, like they had kept this huge secret from me. I confronted Linda about it, demanding to know why they never told me. Linda broke down crying. She said they had planned to tell me everything on that camping trip, not just about their engagement, but about their history too. She showed me old photos of her, Dad, and me at various events over the years. There she was at my middle school graduation, at a few of my baseball games. I had always assumed she was just one of Dad's co-workers. She told me about how Dad had been there for her when her husband died, how he'd bring her casseroles and mow her lawn without being asked. And how she had supported Dad through the tough years of raising me alone, offering advice and a shoulder to cry on when he felt overwhelmed. I didn't know how to process this information. On one hand, I was angry that they had kept this from me for so long. On the other hand, knowing that Linda had been a part of our lives for years made me see her in a different light. She wasn't just some woman Dad met and fell for quickly. She had been there, supporting him, supporting us, for a long time. This revelation has stirred up a lot of complicated feelings. I'm angry at Dad for never telling me the full story. I'm hurt that Linda kept up the charade even after Dad passed. But I'm also grateful that Dad had someone who cared about him for all those years. I've been distant with Linda since finding out. I know it's not entirely fair, but I need time to process everything. She's been giving me space, which I appreciate. In the midst of all this emotional turmoil, we got some potentially good news. The company I'm working for is expanding, and there's an opportunity for me to move into a higher paying position. It would mean more responsibilities and longer hours, but it could really help our financial situation. I'm torn about what to do. Taking the promotion would mean putting college off for even longer. But it could also mean securing our financial future and keeping the house. Plus, if I'm being honest, the idea of burying myself in work and not having to deal with all these complicated emotions is tempting. I don't know what the right move is. I feel like I'm standing at a crossroads, and whatever choice I make will shape the rest of my life. How do I even begin to make this decision? Update 3, it's been a whirlwind few weeks since my last update. I've got a lot to fill you in on. First, I decided to take the promotion at work. It's been challenging, but I'm learning a lot. The pay increase has definitely helped ease our financial stress. We're not out of the woods yet, but things are looking up. I'm now leading a small team working on integrating machine learning into our diagnostic software. It's exciting work, and I feel like I'm really making a difference. Now, on to the big news. Remember how I mentioned that Linda and I had been distant since I found out about her history with Dad? Well, that came to a head in a pretty unexpected way. Last weekend, I was going through some of Dad's old things in the attic. I found a box of old home videos that I'd never seen before. Curious, I started watching them. Most were typical family videos, birthdays, holidays, that sort of thing. But then I found one that changed everything. It was a video from when I was about 10 years old. It showed me at a school play. I was playing the Tin Man in our school's production of The Wizard of Oz. I remember the play, but what I didn't remember was seeing Linda in the audience, sitting right next to Dad. They were laughing together, cheering me on. The camera caught a moment where Dad reached over and squeezed Linda's hand. The look they shared. It was clear even then that they cared deeply for each other. As I watched more videos, I saw Linda pop up again and again. At my little league games, at backyard barbecues, even on one of our camping trips. She was always there, in the background, a constant presence I had somehow never really noticed. Watching those videos, something in me just broke. All the anger and resentment I'd been holding on to melted away. I realized that Linda hadn't been trying to insert herself into our lives, she had been a part of our family all along. I had just been too young to realize it. I went downstairs and found Linda in the kitchen. Without saying a word, I just hugged her. We both started crying. We spent the next few hours talking, really talking, for the first time since Dad died. She shared stories about her and Dad that I'd never heard before. How he'd been there for her when her husband died. How she'd supported him through the tough years of raising me alone. Linda told me about the first time Dad talked about proposing. It was after my high school graduation. Apparently, I had thanked her in my valedictorian speech, calling her my second mom. She said Dad got teary-eyed and said, "I think it's time we make it official." It wasn't an easy conversation. There were moments of anger, moments of sadness. But by the end of it, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I finally understood why Dad had wanted us to be a family. Because in many ways, we already were. Linda and I have made a pact to be more open with each other going forward. No more secrets, no more tiptoeing around our feelings. It's not going to be easy, and we'll probably have our fair share of disagreements. But we're both committed to making it work. As for the house, we've decided to keep it for now. With my promotion and Linda's teaching job, we're managing to make ends meet. We're even talking about the possibility of me taking some online classes next semester. It's not the same as going back to college full-time, but it's a start. I know we still have a long road ahead of us. There are still days when I miss Dad so much it hurts. But for the first time since he died, I feel like I'm not facing that road alone. I have Linda, and in a way, I have a piece of Dad too.